The rain hammered against my windshield like angry fingers as I pulled into the parking garage beneath Mira's office building. 43 years old, and I was still playing the role of the thoughtful husband, bringing flowers to my wife after she'd texted me about having a terrible day at work. The bouquet of white roses sat on my passenger seat, already wilting from the humidity. "You're braver than most, man," Jace, the security guard, said as he buzzed me through the after-hours entrance. His comment struck me as odd, but I was too focused on my mission of mercy to ask what he meant. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt eternal. Each floor that passed gave me more time to rehearse what I'd say to Mira, something supportive, something that would remind her why she married an IT consultant instead of one of those corporate sharks she worked with every day. The elevator dinged, and I stepped into the dimly lit hallway of Kelman and Associates Marketing. Most of the office was dark, but I could see light spilling from Mira's corner office. Her door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. Good, I thought. Maybe I could meet whoever was keeping her so late and put a face to the names she mentioned during her increasingly rare conversations at home. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, balancing the flowers and a cup of her favorite coffee I'd picked up from the lobby. "Surprise, honey, I thought you might need some—" The words died in my throat like a car engine running out of gas. My wife of 12 years was pressed against her desk, her blouse unbuttoned, her skirt hiked up around her waist. Behind her stood Orion Vanton, her boss, his expensive suit rumpled, his silver hair mussed. In his hand, he held what I recognized as my wife's black lace underwear, the ones I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. "Oh, God," Mira gasped, scrambling to cover herself. "Cedric, this isn't what it looks like." Orion didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, he straightened his tie with one hand while still holding my wife's underwear with the other, like some kind of trophy. "It's just a joke," Mira stammered, her face flushed red. We were talking about the Henderson account, and Orion was showing me this funny thing he found in his desk drawer and—" "A joke," I repeated, my voice flat as a pancake. Of all the sitcom moments in the world, this one didn't come with a laugh track. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a wet splash. The white roses followed, scattering across the polished hardwood like surrender flags. "Cedric, please, let me explain," Mira said, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. I looked at Orion, really looked at him. The man was 50-something, with that entitled smirk that came from old money and newer power. He'd been Mira's boss for 3 years, and she'd mentioned him constantly during that time. Always business, she'd said. Always professional. "How long?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Cedric, don't do this here," Mira pleaded. "How long?" I repeated. Orion finally spoke up, his voice carrying that smooth, practiced tone he probably used in board meetings. "Look, Fallon, this is between adults. Why don't you go home, and we can all discuss this like civilized people tomorrow?" Something inside me shifted at that moment. Not snapped. That would be too dramatic. It was more like a gear clicking into place, a mechanism I didn't know I possessed suddenly engaging. I turned around without another word and walked out of the office. Behind me, I could hear Mira calling my name, her voice rising to a near shriek, but I didn't look back. The elevator doors closed on her desperate pleas, and I descended into the parking garage feeling like a different person than the one who'd gone up. Jace looked up from his security monitors as I passed. "Everything okay, Mr. Fallon?" "Just peachy," I said, and meant it. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, rain drumming on the roof, watching the entrance to the parking garage. At 9:47 p.m., Orion's black Mercedes emerged, followed 3 minutes later by Mira's silver Honda. They were being careful, maintaining the illusion that this had been a chance encounter, a misunderstanding. but I knew better now. I knew a lot of things I hadn't known an hour ago. I drove home to our suburban house, the one I'd bought with my inheritance from my father, the one I'd spent weekends renovating while Mira attended networking events and client dinners. The house felt different now, like a stage set for a play I'd been unknowingly performing in for years. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I went straight to my home office and fired up my computer. Being an IT consultant had its advantages, especially when your wife had asked you to set up all the cloud storage and digital systems for both your household and her workplace. Mira had always been impressed by my technical skills, never realizing that the same abilities that kept her files organized could also be used to access them. Within an hour, I had a clear picture of the situation. Email timestamps showed that Mira and Orion's professional relationship had started getting personal about 8 months ago. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a weekend getaway to the mountains that she'd told me was a company retreat. The lies were so numerous and detailed that I almost had to admire her dedication. But what really caught my attention was their recent financial activity. Orion had been funneling company bonus money into a private account, money that technically belonged to both him and Mira for a project they'd completed together. It was sitting there, earning interest, probably meant for another romantic getaway. I transferred the entire amount to an account I'd set up years ago for emergency home repairs. $23,000, moved with a few keystrokes. It wasn't theft. The money had been allocated to both of them, and as Mira's spouse, I had legal access to her accounts. But it would definitely get their attention. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. "Where are you? We need to talk." I turned off the phone and went to bed in the guest room. For the first time in months, I slept like a baby. The next morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the news when Mira came home. She looked like she'd been up all night, her makeup smeared, her clothes wrinkled. She'd probably spent the time at Orion's place, crafting their story, preparing their defense. "Cedric, we need to talk," she said, hovering in the kitchen doorway like she was afraid to come closer. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said, not looking up from my tablet. "How was your evening? Did you get that Henderson account sorted out?" "Stop it," she snapped. "You know what happened. I saw my wife with her boss, in a state of undress, with him holding her underwear," I said calmly. "What exactly am I supposed to think about that?" She sat down across from me, reaching for my hands, but I pulled them away. "It was a mistake," she said. "A moment of weakness. Orion and I have been working so closely on this project, and the stress and the long hours—" "8 months," I interrupted. Her face went pale. "What? 8 months of mistakes? That's a lot of moments of weakness, Mira. The Riverside Inn, Giuseppe's restaurant, that weekend in Asheville that you told me was a company retreat." I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how I knew these details. The beautiful thing about being married to someone for 12 years is that you know exactly what they look like when they're caught. "You went through my things," she accused. "I went through our things," I corrected. "Our shared accounts, our joint credit cards, our family cloud storage that I set up for us. Amazing what you can learn when you actually pay attention." She tried a different approach, leaning forward with tears in her eyes. "Cedric, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this together." "Can we?" I asked. "Can we work through the part where you've been lying to me for 8 months? Can we work through the part where you brought another man into our bed?" "He was never in our bed," she protested. "Hotel beds then. His bed. Does it really matter which bed it was?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out what approach would work best. It was the same look she got when she was preparing a pitch for a difficult client. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I want you to leave," I said simply. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. It's my house. I bought it with my inheritance, remember? Your name isn't on the deed. That was a lie, but she didn't know that. Her name was on the deed, but she'd never bothered to read the paperwork when we'd bought the place. She'd been too busy with her career to worry about such mundane details. You can't just throw me out, she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave while I figure out what I want to do next. Take whatever you need for a few days. I'm sure Orion has a guest room. She flinched at that, and I felt a small surge of satisfaction. I'll be back tonight, she said, standing up. This is still my home. Of course, I said agreeably. It's your choice. After she left, I made a phone call to my old college buddy, Tanner Morrison. Tanner had gone down a different path than me after graduation. He'd spent a few years working for companies that specialized in digital security, which was a polite way of saying he knew how to find information that people thought was hidden. Cedric Fallon, he said when he answered. Haven't heard from you in months. What's going on? I need a favor, I said, and I need it to be completely off the books. This sounds interesting. What kind of favor? I told him about Mira and Orion, keeping the details clinical and factual. Tanner listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always liked about him. So, you want me to do some digging on this Orion character? He asked when I finished. I want to know everything, I said. His finances, his history, his habits. I want to know what skeletons he has in his closet. This is about revenge, isn't it? This is about justice, I corrected. Same thing, different packaging, Tanner said, but I could hear the grin in his voice. Give me 48 hours. The rest of the day passed quietly. I went to work, handled my usual client calls, fixed a server issue for a law firm downtown. Normal activities for a normal day, except that everything felt different now. I felt like I was seeing the world through new eyes, noticing details I'd missed before. Mrs. Haverhill, our next-door neighbor, was watering her garden when I got home that evening. She was 70-something and had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, which meant she knew everyone's business better than they did themselves. Hello, Cedric, she called out. How are you doing, dear? I'm well, Mrs. Haverhill. How are your roses coming along? Oh, they're lovely this year. I saw Mira leave this morning with a suitcase. Are you two taking a trip? Mrs. Haverhill had seen Mira leave with a suitcase, which meant she'd also seen everything else that had been happening around our house lately. Just a business trip, I said casually. You know how her job is. Oh yes, very demanding. I've noticed how often she works late, and that nice man with the fancy car has been by several times to pick up files and things. There it was. Mrs. Haverhill had seen Orion at our house. The affair hadn't just been confined to hotels and restaurants. They'd been meeting in my home, in the house I'd bought and renovated and maintained while Mira built her career. Files and things, I repeated. Well, I assume they were files. They certainly seemed to be working closely together, very dedicated to their job, both of them. Mrs. Haverhill's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. She'd figured out what was going on long before I had. Yes, very dedicated, I agreed. That evening, I went through the house room by room, looking for signs of Orion's presence. I found them everywhere once I knew what to look for. A coffee mug in the sink that wasn't mine or Mira's. A different brand of beer in the refrigerator. The guest bathroom had been used recently. There were water spots on the mirror and a towel that smelled like expensive cologne. They'd been meeting here regularly in my house, probably laughing about how oblivious I was. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Mira. I'm coming home, she said without preamble. Okay, I said. We're going to talk about this like adults. If you say so. She arrived 20 minutes later, and I could tell immediately that she'd spent the day strategizing. She'd changed clothes, fixed her makeup, and put on the perfume I'd bought her for Christmas. She was treating this like a business negotiation. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, settling onto the couch next to me. You're right to be upset. I made some poor choices, and I hurt you. But Cedric, we've been together for 12 years. We have a history, a life together. Doesn't that mean something? It means a lot, I said honestly. That's why this hurts so much. Then let's fix it, she said, moving closer. Let's go to counseling. Let's take a vacation, just the two of us. We can get through this. What about Orion? What about him? Are you going to stop seeing him? She hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough. Of course. It's over. It was never serious anyway. Never serious, I repeated. 8 months of hotel rooms and romantic dinners, but it was never serious. How do you know about the hotels? She asked, her mask slipping slightly. I know about a lot of things, Mira. I know about the money you and Orion have been stashing away. I know about the weekend trips. I know about the times he's been here, in our house, while I was at work. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally, resignation. You've been spying on me, she said. I've been paying attention to my wife. There's a difference. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is ridiculous. You're acting like some kind of jealous stalker. I'm acting like a husband who just discovered his wife has been cheating on him for 8 months. Fine, she snapped, turning to face me. Yes, I've been seeing Orion. Yes, we've been together. But it's not what you think it is. What do I think it is? You think it's some grand romance, some great love affair. It's not. It's just something that happened. We worked together, we spend a lot of time together, and things developed. Things developed, I repeated, like a rash. Don't be crude. I'm not being crude. I'm trying to understand how my wife of 12 years developed a relationship with another man without thinking it might be worth mentioning to me. She was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at Mrs. Haverhill's house. We haven't been happy for a long time, Cedric, she said finally. You know that. We've been like roommates for years. When was the last time we really talked? When was the last time we did anything together besides watch television and go to sleep? She wasn't wrong about that. Our marriage had been running on autopilot for years, both of us focused on our careers, our individual goals. But that didn't justify what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to talk to Orion instead? It wasn't planned. It just happened. For 8 months. Yes, for 8 months. At least she was being honest now, or as honest as she was capable of being. What do you want, Mira? I asked. Do you want to stay married? Do you want to work on this? Or do you want to be with Orion? I want to stay married, she said quickly. I want us to work on this. And Orion? I'll end it. I'll transfer to a different department or find a new job if I have to. You'd do that? If it means saving our marriage, yes. I looked at her standing there by the window, backlit by the streetlight, and for a moment I could see the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. Young, ambitious, full of dreams and plans for the future. We'd been good together once, before careers and mortgages and the slow erosion of daily life had worn us down to polite strangers sharing a house. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who could lie to my face for 8 months, who could bring her lover into our home, who could stand here now and promise to change while probably already planning her next move. Okay, I said. Okay? Okay, let's try to work on this. The relief on her face was so obvious it was almost painful to watch. Thank you, she said, rushing over to sit next to me again. Thank you for giving us another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise you won't regret it. She leaned in to kiss me, and I let her. Her lips were soft and familiar, but all I could think about was where those lips had been, who else they'd been kissing. I love you, she whispered against my mouth. I love you too, I lied. Because the truth was, I didn't love her anymore. The man who had loved Mira Kellran had ceased to exist the moment I walked into that office and saw her with Orion Vanton. In his place was someone new, someone I was just beginning to understand, someone who was very good at pretending. The next morning felt like the beginning of a performance I'd been rehearsing my entire life without knowing it. Mira made coffee and toast, humming softly while she moved around the kitchen. She was playing the role of the repentant wife, and she was playing it well. "I called in sick today," she announced, setting a plate in front of me. "I thought we could spend the day together. Maybe drive up to the lake like we used to do." "That sounds nice," I said, buttering my toast with mechanical precision. "But I have 3 client calls scheduled. Maybe this weekend?" "Of course," she said quickly. "Work comes first. I understand that." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on either of us. I went to my office and made my calls, but my mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes, I could hear Mira moving around the house, cleaning things that were already clean, organizing things that were already organized. She was trying to demonstrate her commitment to our marriage through domestic activity. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Layla from Mira's office. Can we meet? I have information you need to know. Layla Gant." I knew the name from Mira's work stories. They'd started at Kelman and Associates around the same time and had developed what Mira described as a close friendship. Layla was in her mid-30s, single, and according to Mira, somewhat bitter about her lack of advancement at the company. I texted back, "When and where?" "Coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour." I told Mira I needed to run some errands and drove downtown to meet Layla. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open in front of her. She was attractive in a sharp, professional way, with short, dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Fallon," she said, standing to shake my hand, "thank you for meeting me. Call me Cedric, and thank you for reaching out." We sat down, and she got straight to the point. "I'm assuming you know about Mira and Orion," she said. "I do now. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but it wasn't my place. At least, that's what I told myself. How long have you known?" "From the beginning. I work late most nights, and I started noticing patterns. Orion would always find reasons to keep Mira after hours. They'd take long lunches together. There were overnight trips that seemed unnecessary." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a photo of Mira and Orion at what looked like an expensive restaurant. They were holding hands across the table, looking at each other with obvious intimacy. "I took this 3 months ago," Layla said. "I was having dinner with a client at the same restaurant, and I saw them there. They didn't notice me." "Why are you showing me this?" Layla closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. "Because Orion Vanton is a predator, and Mira isn't his first victim." "Victim?" Poor choice of words. Mira knew exactly what she was doing. But Orion has a pattern. He targets women who work for him, women who are ambitious and willing to do whatever it takes to advance their careers. He promises them promotions, better assignments, partnership opportunities. And delivers? Sometimes. But there's always a price. She told me about 2 other women who had worked at Kelman and Associates in the past 5 years. Both had been involved with Orion. Both had received significant promotions during their relationships with him, and both had eventually left the company under mysterious circumstances. What happened to them? The first one, Rebecca Martinez, was transferred to the Seattle office after Orion got bored with her. She quit within 6 months. The second one, Jennifer Walsh, was actually fired for allegedly stealing client information. Allegedly? Jennifer swore she was set up. She claimed Orion had given her access to confidential files and then reported her to HR when she threatened to tell his wife about their affair. I absorbed this information while Layla ordered another coffee. The picture she was painting of Orion Vanton was even worse than I'd imagined. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Because I think Mira is about to become the third casualty, and frankly, I'm tired of watching Orion destroy people's lives. You don't like Mira very much, do you? Layla smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely amused. Mira and I have a complicated relationship, she said. We started at the company on the same day, with the same qualifications and the same ambitions. The difference is that I wasn't willing to sleep with the boss to get ahead. You think that's what this is about? Career advancement? I think it started that way. Mira saw an opportunity and took it, but I also think she got in over her head. Orion is very good at making women feel special, at making them believe they're the exception to his pattern. And now? Now I think Mira actually believes she's in love with him, which makes her more dangerous to him than the others were. I thought about Mira's behavior over the past 24 hours, her eagerness to reconcile, her promises to end things with Orion. She told me she was going to stop seeing him, I said. She might try, but Orion won't make it easy for her. He doesn't like being dumped, especially by women who know too much about his business practices. What do you mean? Layla glanced around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. Orion has been using his relationships with these women to gain access to confidential information, client lists, financial data, strategic plans. He's been selling that information to competing firms. And you can prove this? I can prove some of it. I've been documenting everything for months, building a case. Why haven't you reported him? To who? HR? Orion has friends in HR. The police? Corporate espionage is hard to prove, and I'd need more evidence than I have. But if Mira were willing to cooperate... I understood what she was suggesting. Mira had been intimately involved with Orion for 8 months. She would have access to information that could bring him down. Mira won't cooperate, I said. Even if she ends the affair, she won't do anything that might hurt her own career. Then we'll have to find another way. We? Layla leaned forward, her eyes intense. Orion Vanton has been manipulating and destroying people for years. He's hurt your wife, he's hurt you, and he's hurt a lot of other people. Don't you think it's time someone stopped him? I thought about it for a moment. 24 hours ago, I would have said no. 24 hours ago, I would have focused on saving my marriage and let Orion Vanton continue his predatory behavior unchallenged. But I wasn't the same person I'd been 24 hours ago. What did you have in mind? I asked. Layla smiled, and I realized that she'd been planning this conversation for a long time. First, we need to document everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every email between Mira and Orion. Can you access Mira's personal accounts? Some of them. Good. I can handle the office side of things. Between the two of us, we should be able to build a comprehensive picture of their relationship and Orion's business activities. And then? Then we destroy him. I drove home, feeling like I'd just enlisted in a war I didn't fully understand. Layla had given me her personal phone number and a secure email address where we could share information. She'd also given me a small device that looked like a USB drive. It's a keylogger, she'd explained. If you can get it onto Mira's computer for just a few minutes, it will record everything she types for the next month. Passwords, emails, everything. The device was sitting in my pocket now, a small piece of technology that could give me complete access to my wife's digital life. Part of me felt guilty about even considering using it, but a larger part of me wanted to know the truth, all of it, no matter how painful it might be. Mira was in the kitchen when I got home, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. She'd changed into a dress I hadn't seen her wear in months, and she'd done something different with her hair. "How were your errands?" she asked, kissing me on the cheek. "Fine, just boring business stuff." "Well, I hope you're hungry. I'm making that pasta dish you used to love." Used to love. Past tense. She was right. I had loved her homemade pasta once upon a time. Now it just reminded me of all the dinners she'd missed, all the evenings she'd spent with Orion instead of with me. "Smells great," I said. While she finished cooking, I went upstairs to change clothes. Mira's laptop was sitting on the dresser in our bedroom, closed but not password protected. It would be easy to plug in Layla's device, let it install itself, and remove it before Mira noticed. I stood there for a full minute, holding the keylogger, debating with myself. Using it would cross a line I'd never crossed before. It would make me a spy in my own home, a husband who couldn't trust his wife. But then I remembered the image of Orion holding Mira's underwear, the casual arrogance in his expression, the way he dismissed me like I was an inconvenience rather than a person whose life he'd just shattered. I plugged in the device. It took less than 30 seconds to install itself. The laptop screen flickered once, then returned to normal. I removed the keylogger and slipped it back into my pocket. "Dinner's ready," Mira called from downstairs. The pasta was actually quite good, and Mira had opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. We sat at the dining room table like a normal married couple, discussing our days, making plans for the weekend. If someone had been watching us through the window, they would have seen a pleasant domestic scene, but I could feel the performance in every gesture, every smile, every casual touch of her hand on mine. Mira was working hard to convince me that our marriage was worth saving, and I was working equally hard to convince her that I believed it. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," she said as we finished eating. "About us being like roommates. You were right. We've let our careers take over our lives and we've forgotten how to be together." "It happens to a lot of couples," I said diplomatically. "But it doesn't have to happen to us. We can change things. I can change things." "How?" "I'm going to ask for a transfer to a different department. Get away from all the complications." "You mean get away from Orion?" "Yes. I think that would be best for everyone." She was saying all the right things, but something in her tone didn't ring true. Maybe it was the slight hesitation before she said Orion's name, or the way she avoided making direct eye contact when she talked about transferring departments. "That's a big decision," I said. "Are you sure you want to give up everything you've built in your current position?" "What I've built isn't worth losing you over." Again, the right words, but delivered like lines from a script she'd memorized. After dinner, we watched a movie together on the couch. Mira curled up against me the way she used to do when we were dating, her head on my shoulder, her hand resting on my chest. It should have been comforting, familiar, a sign that we were finding our way back to each other. Instead, it felt like being embraced by a stranger wearing my wife's perfume. Around 10 o'clock, Mira's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then set the phone aside without responding. "Work?" I asked. "Just Layla, asking about something for tomorrow." But I'd seen the name on the screen before she'd turned the phone over. The text wasn't from Layla, it was from Orion. "You should probably answer her," I said casually, "if it's important." "It can wait until tomorrow." The phone buzzed again. And again. Whoever was texting her wasn't giving up easily. "Maybe you should just check," I suggested, "in case it's an emergency." Mira picked up the phone, read the messages, and typed a quick response. Her face remained neutral, but I could see tension in the set of her shoulders. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just some confusion about a client meeting tomorrow." She was lying, of course, but I didn't call her on it. Instead, I suggested we go to bed early, and she agreed with perhaps a little too much enthusiasm. We lay in our bed, in the dark, both pretending to sleep. Mira's breathing was too controlled, too deliberate. She was as wide awake as I was, probably thinking about those text messages, probably planning what she would say to Orion tomorrow. Around midnight, I heard her phone buzz again, very softly. She didn't move to check it, but I could feel her body tense beside me. I waited until I was sure she was actually asleep before I got up and went to my office. The keylogger was already working. I could access everything Mira had typed on her laptop since I'd installed it. There wasn't much yet, just a few work emails and a Google search for marriage counselors near me. But there would be more. Tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until I had a complete picture of what my wife was really thinking, what she was really planning. I also had a message from Tanner Morrison. He'd been busy investigating Orion Vanton, and what he'd found was interesting. "Your boy Orion has some expensive tastes," Tanner had written. "Designer clothes, luxury cars, high-end restaurants. Problem is, his salary at Kellman and Associates doesn't come close to covering his lifestyle. Either he's got family money, or he's got income from other sources." Tanner had attached several financial records showing Orion's spending patterns over the past 2 years. The numbers didn't add up. Orion was living well beyond his means, which supported Layla's theory about him selling confidential information. But the most interesting discovery was a property record showing that Orion owned a condo downtown, in addition to his primary residence in the suburbs. The condo was registered under a shell company, probably to hide it from his wife. I had a pretty good idea what that condo was used for. I forwarded Tanner's information to Layla's secure email address, along with a message. "Found their love nest. What's our next move?" Her response came back within minutes. "Time to pay them a visit." I stared at her message for a long time, understanding that she was proposing something that would take our collaboration to a new level. We weren't just gathering information anymore. We were preparing to take action. The old Cedric Fallon would have hesitated. The old Cedric would have worried about legal consequences, about moral implications, about whether he was becoming someone he didn't want to be. But the old Cedric Fallon was gone, replaced by someone who was tired of being lied to, tired of being taken advantage of, tired of being invisible in his own life. I typed back, "When?" "Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 8. I closed the laptop and went back to bed. Mira was still asleep, or pretending to be. In the dim light from the street lamp outside our window, she looked peaceful, innocent, like the woman I'd married 12 years ago. But looks could be deceiving. I was learning that lesson very well. Tomorrow night, Layla and I would visit Orion's secret condo. We would gather evidence of his affair with my wife, document his illegal business activities, and begin the process of destroying his carefully constructed life. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt like crossing a moral line I could never uncross. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Mira left for work at her usual time, kissing me goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection. She was still playing the role of the reformed wife, and she was getting better at it with practice. "I'm going to talk to HR today about that transfer," she said, as she gathered her things. "Start the process of getting away from complications." "Good," I said. "I think that's the right decision." But even as she said it, I could see something in her eyes that suggested she wasn't entirely committed to the plan. There was a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even regret. After she left, I checked the keylogger data from her laptop. She'd been busy the night before, after I'd gone back to bed. Multiple emails to Orion, all of them deleted from her sent folder but captured by my surveillance software. The messages told a story I'd been expecting but still found painful to read. "Cedric knows about us. I had to tell him something, so I said it was over between you and me. I need some time to figure out how to handle this. He's being surprisingly understanding. Maybe too understanding. I think he might be planning something. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to see you. I need to know we're going to be okay." Orion's responses were brief and businesslike. "Let me handle Cedric if he becomes a problem. Don't do anything stupid. We've worked too hard to let your husband ruin this. Meet me at the usual place tomorrow night. 9 p.m. The usual place. That had to be the downtown condo Tanner had discovered. I forwarded the messages to Layla, along with a note. "They're meeting tonight at 9. Perfect timing." Her response was immediate. "This is going to be easier than I thought." I spent the rest of the day making preparations. I told my afternoon clients that I had a family emergency and rescheduled their appointments. I drove downtown and did reconnaissance on Orion's condo building, noting the security cameras, the entrance points, the parking arrangements. The building was upscale but not ostentatious, the kind of place a successful businessman might keep as a downtown pied-à-terre. It had a doorman during business hours, but the evening shift seemed to be less attentive. I also stopped by an electronics store and bought a few items that might come in handy: a digital camera with a powerful zoom lens, a small audio recorder, and a set of lockpicks I ordered online for same-day delivery. The lockpicks were supposedly for a home security demonstration, but the website didn't ask too many questions. When Mira came home that evening, she seemed nervous and distracted. She made dinner, but barely touched her food. She kept checking her phone and jumping at small sounds. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just tired. It was a long day." "How did the conversation with HR go?" "Oh, that. They said they'd look into transfer opportunities, but it might take a few weeks to find something suitable." Another lie. I'd already checked. She hadn't spoken to anyone in HR. "Well, these things take time," I said supportively. At 7:30, she announced that she was going out to meet Layla for drinks. "Girl talk," she said, attempting a casual tone. "I need to vent about everything that's been happening." "That sounds healthy. Take your time." She kissed me goodbye, and I watched her drive away, knowing exactly where she was really going and who she was really meeting. At 8 o'clock sharp, Layla pulled up in front of my house. She was driving a nondescript sedan and wearing dark clothes. She looked like someone preparing for a covert operation, which I suppose she was. "Ready for this?" she asked as I got into the passenger seat. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Good, because once we start down this path, there's no going back." We drove downtown in relative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I found myself wondering what had motivated Layla to get involved in this situation. She claimed to be concerned about Orion's pattern of behavior, but I sensed there was more to it than that. "Can I ask you something?" I said as we approached the condo building. "Sure. What's your real reason for doing this? And don't tell me it's just about stopping Orion's predatory behavior." Layla was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. 3 years ago, I was up for a promotion to senior account manager, she said finally. I'd been working toward it for months, putting in extra hours, bringing in new clients, doing everything right. The promotion should have been mine. But it went to someone else? It went to Rebecca Martinez, the first woman I told you about, the one who was involved with Orion. She got the promotion, and 6 months later she was transferred to Seattle. And you think Orion influenced the decision? I know he did. Rebecca wasn't qualified for that position. She was a good employee, but she didn't have the experience or the client relationships that I had. The only thing she had that I didn't was a personal relationship with the boss. Now I understood. This wasn't just about justice or stopping a predator. This was about revenge. Layla had been passed over for a promotion because she wasn't willing to sleep with Orion Vanton, and she'd been waiting 3 years for an opportunity to even the score. "So this is personal for you too," I said. "Very personal, but that doesn't make it wrong." She was right about that. Sometimes personal motivations and moral imperatives aligned perfectly. We parked across the street from Orion's building and waited. At 8:47 p.m., Mira's silver Honda pulled into the parking garage. At 8:52, Orion's black Mercedes followed. "Showtime," Layla said. We waited another 10 minutes to make sure they were settled, then crossed the street and entered the building. The evening doorman was reading a newspaper and barely looked up as we passed. We took the elevator to the 8th floor where Orion's condo was located. The hallway was empty and quiet. We could hear faint music coming from behind the door of 8C, Orion's unit. "How do you want to do this?" I whispered. "First, we listen, see what we can hear. Then we get some photos through the window if possible." The condo was a corner unit, with windows facing both the street and the alley behind the building. We took the stairs down to the alley and looked up at Orion's windows. The lights were on, and the curtains were only partially closed. "Can you see anything?" Layla asked. I raised the camera and used the zoom lens to get a closer look. What I saw made my stomach clench with a mixture of anger and revulsion. Mira and Orion were on the couch, and they weren't discussing business. They were wrapped around each other like teenagers, completely absorbed in their passion for each other. Mira's dress was bunched up around her waist, and Orion's hands were everywhere. But what struck me most wasn't the physical intimacy. It was the expression on Mira's face. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, radiant, alive. She'd never looked at me that way. "Get the photos," Layla said quietly. I took dozens of pictures, documenting everything I could see. The camera's zoom lens was powerful enough to capture clear images of both their faces, leaving no doubt about who was involved or what they were doing. "That's enough," I said finally, lowering the camera. "Are you okay?" I realized I was shaking, whether from anger or grief or adrenaline, I couldn't tell. "I'm fine. Let's get out of here." We returned to Layla's car and drove away from the building. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Layla said eventually. "I needed to see it. I needed to know for sure." "What are you going to do now?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had photographic evidence of my wife's affair. I could confront her with it, demand a divorce, try to move on with my life. That's what the old Cedric would have done. But the old Cedric was gone. "I'm going to destroy them," I said. "Both of them." Layla smiled. "Good, because I have some ideas about how to do that." She drove to an all-night diner on the outskirts of town, and we sat in a corner booth, drinking coffee and planning our campaign. Layla had been thinking about this for a long time, and her ideas were both creative and ruthless. "The key is to attack them on multiple fronts simultaneously," she explained. "Personal, professional, and financial. We want to create a cascade of problems that overwhelm their ability to respond." "What did you have in mind?" "First, we expose the affair to everyone who matters: Orion's wife, Mira's family, their colleagues, their clients. We make it impossible for them to continue their relationship without facing serious consequences." "That's just the beginning?" "That's just the beginning. Next, we go after Orion's illegal activities. I've been documenting his corporate espionage for months, but I need more evidence to make it stick. With your help, we can get that evidence." "How?" "Mira has access to Orion's office, his computer, his files. Through your keylogger, we can monitor everything she sees and does. We can use her relationship with him to gather the proof we need to destroy his career." It was a clever plan, using Mira's affair against both of them. She would unknowingly provide us with the ammunition we needed to bring down the man she thought she loved. "What about the financial angle?" I asked. "Orion has been hiding assets from his wife, probably in preparation for a divorce. If we can expose those hidden assets, it will complicate his life considerably. And if we can tie those assets to his illegal activities, it gets even better." "You've really thought this through." "I've had 3 years to think about it." We spent another hour refining the details of our plan. By the time we finished, we had a comprehensive strategy for destroying both Mira and Orion's lives in a way that would be both devastating and completely legal. "There's one more thing," Layla said as we prepared to leave. "Once we start this, they're going to fight back. They'll try to discredit us, maybe even retaliate. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the images I'd seen through Orion's window, the look of happiness on Mira's face as she betrayed everything we'd built together. "Let them try," I said. Layla dropped me off at home at midnight. Mira's car wasn't in the driveway yet, which meant she was still at the condo with Orion. Still playing out her fantasy romance, while her husband sat at home pretending to believe her lies. I went to my office and uploaded the photos from the camera to my computer. Looking at them on the larger screen made them even more painful, but also more useful. The images were clear enough to be used as evidence in a divorce proceeding, and explicit enough to cause serious embarrassment if they were made public. At 12:47 a.m., I heard Mira's car in the driveway. She came into the house quietly, probably hoping I'd already gone to bed. Instead, I was waiting for her in the living room. "How was your evening with Layla?" I asked. "Oh, you're still up. It was good. We talked about a lot of things." "I'm sure you did." She sat down next to me on the couch, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "You smell nice," I said. "Do I? I didn't notice." "It's a nice cologne. Very masculine." She tensed slightly, but recovered quickly. "Layla was trying out some new perfume. Maybe that's what you're smelling." "Maybe." We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us maintaining our respective performances. She was the repentant wife, trying to rebuild her marriage. I was the forgiving husband, willing to give her another chance. Both of us were lying. "I'm tired," she said finally. "I think I'll go to bed." "I'll be up in a few minutes." After she went upstairs, I checked the keylogger data from her laptop. She'd been busy again, sending more messages to Orion from her phone. The software had captured her typing as she composed the texts. "Tonight was amazing. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending with Cedric. I love you. I know this is complicated, but I love you. When can we be together for real? When can we stop hiding?" Orion's responses were less romantic. "Patience. We need to handle this carefully. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Everything will work out if we stick to the plan." What plan? That was a new development, and a concerning one. It suggested that Mira and Orion weren't just having an affair, they were actively plotting something. I forwarded the messages to Layla with a note. "They have a plan. We need to find out what it is." Her response came back immediately, even though it was past 1 in the morning. "Already on it. Check your email." I opened my personal email and found a message from Layla with several attachments: financial records, legal documents, property transfers, a comprehensive dossier on Orion Vanton's recent activities. The picture that emerged was troubling. Over the past 6 months, Orion had been quietly liquidating assets, transferring money to offshore accounts, and preparing for what looked like a major life change. He'd even consulted with a divorce attorney, though he hadn't filed any papers yet. But the most interesting document was a lease agreement for a house in Costa Rica, signed just 2 weeks ago. The lease was for 2 people, and it started in 3 months. Orion wasn't just having an affair with my wife, he was planning to run away with her. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the implications. Mira's promises to end the affair, her talk of marriage counseling and working things out. It was all a lie. She was buying time while she and Orion finalized their escape plan. The betrayal was even deeper than I'd imagined. Not only was she cheating on me, she was planning to abandon our marriage entirely while pretending to try to save it. I forwarded the Costa Rica lease to Layla with a message. "Found their exit strategy. Time to accelerate our timeline." "Agreed," she replied. "Tomorrow we go nuclear." I finally went to bed at 2 in the morning, lying down next to my wife, who was pretending to sleep just as I was pretending to forgive her. In the darkness, I could hear her breathing, smell her perfume, feel the warmth of her body next to mine. But she felt like a stranger. Everything about her felt false now, contaminated by her deception. Tomorrow, Layla and I would begin the systematic destruction of both Mira and Orion's lives. We would expose their affair, ruin their careers, and make sure their planned escape to Costa Rica never happened. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt like war. And I was finally ready to fight. I woke up the next morning with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Mira was already in the shower, humming softly. the same tune she'd been humming yesterday morning when she was playing the repentant wife. Now I knew it was probably a song that reminded her of Orion. Everything she did had a different meaning now that I understood her true intentions. While she was getting ready for work, I checked my secure email. Layla had been busy during the night, and she'd sent me a detailed battle plan with timestamps and specific instructions. Phase 1 begins at 9 a.m., her message read. Are you ready to watch their world collapse? I was more than ready. At 8:30, Mira came downstairs wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and sophisticated that she'd probably bought for her dates with Orion. She kissed me goodbye with the same practiced affection she'd been displaying all week. I love you, she said, looking directly into my eyes. I love you too, I replied, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I meant it. Not the romantic love I'd once felt for her, but something darker and more complex. I loved the idea of what she'd been, and I was going to love destroying what she'd become. I'll be home by 6, she said. Maybe we can go out to dinner tonight, somewhere nice. That sounds perfect. After she left, I went to my office and began executing Layla's plan. Phase 1 was simple but devastating: exposure. At exactly 9 a.m., I sent an anonymous email to Patricia Vanton, Orion's wife of 22 years. The email contained 3 of the clearest photos from the previous night, along with a brief message. I thought you should know what your husband does in his downtown condo. At 9:15, I sent similar emails to the senior partners at Kelman and Associates, including the managing director who'd hired both Mira and Orion. At 9:30, I created anonymous accounts on several social media platforms and began posting the photos with carefully crafted captions that identified both Mira and Orion by name and employer. By 10 a.m., the images were spreading across the internet like a virus. My phone started ringing at 10:17. It was Mira, and she sounded panicked. Cedric, something terrible is happening. Someone took photos of me and Orion and they're posting them online. I don't know who would do this, or how they got the pictures. That's awful, I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. What kind of photos? Compromising ones. From last night. Oh God, Cedric, I'm so sorry. I know I told you it was over between us, but I had to see him one more time. I had to tell him in person that we couldn't continue. Even in crisis, she was lying. Even when her world was collapsing around her, she couldn't tell me the truth. Where are you now? I asked. At the office, but HR wants to see me in an hour, and Orion's wife saw the photos. She's on her way here. Patricia's coming to your office. She called and screamed at me for 10 minutes. She said she's going to destroy me, destroy both of us. Cedric, what am I going to do? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She sounded genuinely terrified, like a child who'd been caught in a lie and couldn't understand how the adult world was suddenly crashing down around her. But then I remembered the lease agreement for the house in Costa Rica, the messages about their plan, the months of deception and betrayal. Come home, I said. We'll figure this out together. I can't leave work right now. I have to deal with HR, and the partners want to see me and… Mira, come home. Whatever's happening there, it's not going to get better today. Come home, and we'll talk about how to handle this. She agreed, though I could hear the reluctance in her voice. She probably wanted to coordinate her response with Orion, make sure their stories aligned. But the crisis was moving too fast for careful planning. While I waited for her to arrive, I monitored the social media posts I'd created. The photos were being shared rapidly, with comments ranging from shocked disapproval to crude humor. Someone had identified Kelman and Associates as their employer, and the company's social media pages were being flooded with questions and criticism. Layla sent me a text update. Orion's wife showed up at the office with a lawyer. Security had to escort her out. This is better than I hoped. At 11:30, Mira came home looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past 2 hours. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, her expensive new dress wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee. "Cedric, thank God you're here," she said, collapsing into my arms. "Everything's falling apart. I don't know what to do." I held her while she cried, stroking her hair and making soothing sounds. It was a performance worthy of an award, considering that I was the architect of her destruction. "Tell me what happened," I said gently. "Patricia came to the office with a divorce lawyer. She was screaming, accusing me of destroying her family. Security had to remove her, but not before she made a huge scene in front of everyone." "What about HR?" "They suspended me pending an investigation. They said the photos constitute a violation of company policy regarding workplace relationships, and the managing director? He looked at me like I was something disgusting he'd found on his shoe." "What about Orion?" "He's suspended too, but Cedric, he's blaming me for everything. He's telling people that I seduced him, that I was obsessed with him and wouldn't leave him alone." That was interesting. Orion was already throwing Mira under the bus to save his own career. So much for their great love affair. "That's not true, is it?" I asked. "Of course it's not true. We were both involved, we both made choices, but he's acting like he's the victim here." She was finally getting a taste of the real Orion Vanton, the man who destroyed 2 other women's careers to protect himself. Unfortunately for Mira, she was learning this lesson too late to do her any good. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I can't think straight. Everything's happening so fast." My phone buzzed with another text from Layla. "Phase 2 ready to launch. Give me the signal." Phase 2 was going to be even more devastating than Phase 1. While Mira dealt with the personal and professional fallout from the affair, we were going to destroy Orion's financial life and expose his illegal business activities. But first, I needed to extract some information from my wife. "Mira, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay." "How long has this been going on? And please don't lie to me anymore. I deserve the truth." She was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. 8 months, she said finally. "It started last spring, after the Morrison Industries account. We were working late, and we went out for drinks to celebrate, and one thing led to another." "And you've been meeting regularly since then?" "Yes. At first it was just occasional, but over the past few months, it became more serious." "How serious?" Another long pause. I could see her debating how much truth she could afford to tell me. "We talked about being together," she admitted. "About what it would be like if we were both free to pursue a relationship." "Free meaning divorced?" "Yes." "Did you make any specific plans?" "We talked about it. But Cedric, it was just talk, fantasy. I never seriously intended to leave you." That was a lie, but I let it pass. I had the Costa Rica lease agreement as proof of her real intentions. "What about Orion's business activities?" I asked. "Did you ever notice anything unusual about his work, his clients, his income?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, did he ever ask you to help him with anything that seemed questionable? Access to confidential files, client information, that sort of thing?" She looked genuinely confused by the question, which suggested that Orion had been careful not to involve her directly in his corporate espionage activities. "No, nothing like that. Why would you ask?" "Just trying to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Tanner Morrison. "I need to take this," I told Mira. "It's a work call." I went to my office and closed the door. "Tanner, what's the situation?" "Your boy Orion is having a very bad day," Tanner said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Someone leaked those photos to his wife's divorce attorney, and they've already filed papers. She's going after half of everything, including assets he thought were hidden." "What about the corporate espionage angle?" "That's where it gets interesting. I've been monitoring his communications, and he's been in contact with 3 different competing firms over the past 6 months. He's been selling client lists, strategic plans, financial projections, everything he could get his hands on. Can you prove it? I can prove some of it, but if we had access to his office computer, his personal files, we could prove all of it. How do we get that access? That's where your wife comes in. She has a key card to the building, right? And she knows Orion's office layout, his computer passwords, his filing system. I understood what Tanner was suggesting. We could use Mira's access to gather the evidence we needed to destroy Orion completely. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long. Once the company finishes their investigation, they're going to change all the access codes and passwords. We have maybe 48 hours. After I hung up with Tanner, I sat in my office for a few minutes, considering my options. I could continue with the original plan, letting the affair exposure run its course and hoping it would be enough to destroy both Mira and Orion's lives. Or I could escalate things, using Mira's access to gather evidence that would send Orion to prison for corporate espionage. The second option was riskier, but it was also more complete. It would ensure that Orion paid for everything he'd done, not just the affair. I sent a text to Layla. Need to meet. New developments. Her response was immediate. Coffee shop on 5th Street. 20 minutes. I went back to the living room where Mira was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with a look of horror on her face. What is it? I asked. The photos are everywhere. Someone posted them on the company's Facebook page, and people are sharing them and commenting. Some of the comments are really nasty. I'm sorry you're going through this. My mother called. She saw them on Facebook. She's driving up from Atlanta tonight. That was an unexpected complication. Mira's mother, Helen, was a formidable woman who'd never particularly liked me, but who had very strong opinions about marital fidelity. What did you tell her? I told her it was a misunderstanding, that the photos were taken out of context, but she didn't believe me. What are you going to tell her when she gets here? I don't know. The truth, I guess. Or part of it. I sat down next to her on the couch and took her hand. It felt cold and small in mine. Mira, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you for a favor. What kind of favor? I think Orion is going to try to blame you for everything that's happened. He's already started, according to what you told me. If this gets worse, if there are legal consequences, you're going to need evidence to protect yourself. What kind of evidence? Emails, documents, anything that shows this was a mutual relationship and not you pursuing him against his will. She nodded slowly. That makes sense. But how do I get that evidence? I'm suspended from work. You still have your access card, don't you? And you know his passwords? Yes, but I can't just walk into the office and start going through his files. Security will see me. What if you went at night, after hours? She stared at me like I'd suggested she rob a bank. You want me to break into the office? I want you to protect yourself. If Orion throws you under the bus to save his own career, you're going to need proof that he's lying. It took me another 20 minutes to convince her, but eventually she agreed. We would go to the office that evening, after the building was mostly empty. She would use her access card to get us into Orion's office, and we would gather evidence of their relationship. What she didn't know was that we would also be gathering evidence of Orion's corporate espionage activities. I need to run a quick errand, I told her after we'd finalized our plan. Will you be okay here by yourself? Where are you going? Just to meet with a client, someone who might be able to help us with the legal aspects of this situation. Another lie, but at this point, lying to Mira felt as natural as breathing. I drove to the coffee shop where Layla was waiting. She looked excited, energized by the chaos we'd unleashed. This is going better than I expected, she said as I sat down. Orion's wife has frozen all their joint accounts, the company is in full damage control mode, and the photos have been picked up by 3 local news stations. It's about to get better, I said, and told her about our plan to access Orion's office that evening. Perfect, she said. I'll meet you there with the equipment we need to copy his files. By tomorrow morning, we'll have everything we need to destroy him completely. What about Mira? What about her? Once we expose Orion's corporate espionage, she's going to be investigated too. She might be charged as an accomplice. Layla shrugged. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I thought about that as I drove home. Mira had betrayed me, lied to me, and planned to abandon our marriage for a fantasy life in Costa Rica. She deserved whatever happened to her. But she was still my wife. Despite everything she'd done, despite all the lies and deception, part of me still felt protective of her. That part was going to have to be ignored. When I got home, Mira was on the phone with someone speaking in urgent, hushed tones. She hung up quickly when she saw me. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Layla. She was checking on me, seeing how I was handling everything." Another lie. I'd just left Layla at the coffee shop, and she hadn't mentioned calling Mira. That was nice of her. She's been a good friend through all of this. If only she knew that her good friend was one of the architects of her destruction. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for our evening mission. Mira seemed nervous but determined, convinced that she was protecting herself from Orion's betrayal. I let her believe that was what we were doing. At 7 p.m., we drove downtown to Kelman and Associates. The building was mostly empty, with only a few lights visible in the upper floors. Security was minimal. Just one guard at the front desk who was more interested in his crossword puzzle than in monitoring the building. Mira's access card worked perfectly, getting us past the main entrance and up to the 15th floor. The office was dark and quiet, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the glow from the city lights outside. "This feels wrong," Mira whispered as we made our way to Orion's office. "We're not stealing anything," I reminded her. "We're just documenting what's already here." Orion's office was exactly what I'd expected from a man of his ego and ambitions. Expensive furniture, impressive artwork, and a wall covered with awards and photographs of him with various business leaders and politicians. His computer was password protected, but Mira knew the password. Within minutes, we had access to his email accounts, his file directories, and his personal documents. What we found there was even worse than Tanner had suspected. Orion hadn't just been selling confidential information to competing firms. He'd been running a sophisticated corporate espionage operation, using his position at Kelman and Associates to steal trade secrets, client lists, and strategic plans from dozens of companies. The financial records showed payments totaling more than $500,000 over the past 2 years. "Oh my God," Mira whispered, reading over my shoulder. "I had no idea he was doing this." "Did you ever help him access any of these files?" I asked. "Some of them. He said he needed them for legitimate business purposes. I never thought—" She trailed off, realizing the implications. By helping Orion access confidential files, she'd unknowingly become an accomplice to his crimes. "Cedric, what are we going to do? If this comes out, I could go to prison." "We're going to copy everything," I said, "and then we're going to decide how to use it." I spent the next hour downloading files to a portable drive while Mira paced nervously around the office. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, financial records, client lists, strategic documents. Everything we needed to prove that Orion Vanton was a corporate spy and a thief. Just as I was finishing, we heard footsteps in the hallway outside. "Someone's coming," Mira hissed. I quickly shut down the computer and grabbed the portable drive. We turned off the lights and crouched behind Orion's desk, listening as the footsteps approached. The door to the office opened, and a flashlight beam swept across the room. "Hello? Is someone in here?" It was the security guard from downstairs. He must have noticed something unusual on his monitors. We held our breath, not moving, as the guard searched the office with his flashlight. After what felt like an eternity, he apparently decided the office was empty and moved on to check other rooms. We waited another 10 minutes before we dared to move. "Let's get out of here," Mira whispered. We made it back to the elevator without being seen, and within minutes, we were out of the building and driving home. "I can't believe we just did that," Mira said as we pulled into our driveway. "We did what we had to do." What happens now? Now we decide how to use what we found. But I'd already decided. Tomorrow morning, I would turn over all the evidence to the FBI, the SEC, and every other agency that might be interested in Orion Vanton's crimes. Mira thought she was protecting herself from Orion's betrayal. In reality, she'd just helped me gather the evidence that would destroy both of their lives completely. The war was almost over, and I was winning. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my home office, reading the morning news on my laptop when I came across a small item buried on page 6 of the business section. Former Kelman and Associates executive Orion Vanton was sentenced yesterday to 4 years in federal prison for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. His accomplice, marketing manager Mira Fallon, received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service as part of a plea agreement. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, feeling a satisfaction that was both complete and hollow. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of investigations, arrests, and media coverage. The evidence we'd gathered from Orion's office had been more than sufficient to convince federal prosecutors to file charges. The affair scandal had been quickly overshadowed by the corporate espionage story, which had made national news. Mira had been arrested at our house on a Tuesday morning, 2 FBI agents showing up at our door with a warrant and handcuffs. She'd looked at me with confusion and betrayal as they read her rights, still not understanding how her world had collapsed so completely. "Did you know about this?" she'd asked me as they led her away. "I know about a lot of things," I'd replied. She'd figured it out eventually, of course. During the plea negotiations, her attorney had explained how the evidence had been gathered, how someone with intimate knowledge of her activities had systematically documented her involvement in Orion's crimes. She'd tried calling me from jail, but I hadn't answered. There was nothing left to say. The divorce papers had been filed the day after her arrest. She hadn't contested them. Orion's downfall had been even more spectacular. His wife had taken him for everything in the divorce. The company had sued him for damages, and multiple clients had filed civil suits. By the time he was sentenced to prison, he was completely bankrupt. The downtown condo had been seized by the government as part of the asset forfeiture proceedings. The house in Costa Rica had been canceled, the deposit forfeited. Their grand escape plan had become a federal case study in corporate crime. Layla had gotten her promotion, finally. With both Mira and Orion gone, there was an opening for senior account manager, and this time there was no question about who deserved it. "Thank you," she'd said to me at Orion's sentencing hearing, "for helping me get justice." "Thank you," I'd replied, "for helping me get revenge." We'd understood each other perfectly. Now, sitting in my quiet house, I tried to figure out how I felt about everything that had happened. I'd set out to destroy the people who had betrayed me, and I'd succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. Mira would spend the next 2 years doing community service and trying to rebuild her reputation. Her career in marketing was over. No reputable company would hire someone with a federal conviction for corporate espionage. Orion was in federal prison, his marriage destroyed, his fortune gone, his reputation in ruins. He would be 60-something when he got out, with no money, no prospects, and a criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. I had won completely and utterly. So why did I feel so empty? My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. It was Mrs. Haverhill from next door. "Cedric, dear, I just wanted to check on you. I know this has been a difficult time." "I'm doing fine, Mrs. Haverhill. Thank you for asking. If you need anything at all, you just let me know. It's so quiet over there now with Mira gone." "I'm getting used to the quiet." "Well, quiet can be good sometimes. Gives a person time to think." After I hung up, I realized she was right. The house was quiet now, quieter than it had been in years. No more lies, no more deception, no more pretending. Just me, alone with the consequences of my choices. I'd become exactly what I'd set out to become, the invisible man who'd made himself visible through revenge. The underestimated husband who'd proven that he was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. I'd won the war, but I wasn't sure what I'd won it for. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I rarely had visitors these days. When I opened the door, I found a young woman standing on my porch, someone I didn't recognize. "Mr. Fallon? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I think we need to talk." Jennifer Walsh. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "I used to work at Kelman and Associates," she continued. "I was involved with Orion Vanton 3 years ago before your wife." Now I remembered. She was the second woman Layla had told me about, the one who'd been fired for allegedly stealing client information. "What can I do for you, Ms. Walsh?" "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did to Orion, for finally making him pay for what he did to me, and to Rebecca, and to your wife." "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you know exactly what I mean. The evidence that destroyed him didn't gather itself. Someone had to plan it, coordinate it, make it happen." She was right, of course, but I wasn't about to admit to anything. "Would you like to come in?" I asked. We sat in my living room, and Jennifer told me her story. It was remarkably similar to what had happened to Mira, except that Jennifer had been smart enough to recognize Orion's true nature before it was too late. "When I threatened to expose him, he framed me for theft and had me fired," she said. "I lost my job, my reputation, my career. I've been working as a waitress for the past 2 years. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry. Be proud. You did what I couldn't do. You brought him down. What makes you think I had anything to do with it?" She smiled, and for a moment she reminded me of Layla. "Because I know what it's like to want revenge against someone who's destroyed your life, and I know what it takes to actually get it." We talked for another hour, and by the time she left, I realized something important. I wasn't alone in my satisfaction with Orion's downfall. There were other people who'd been hurt by him, other lives he'd damaged or destroyed. My revenge had been personal, but its effects had been much broader. I'd gotten justice, not just for myself, but for Jennifer, for Rebecca, for Patricia Vanton, and for everyone else who'd been victimized by Orion's predatory behavior. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. The emptiness that had been haunting me was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. I made coffee, read the news, and started planning my day. I had clients to call, projects to finish, a life to rebuild. The old Cedric Fallon was gone, destroyed along with my marriage and my illusions about the people I'd trusted. In his place was someone harder, more cynical, but also more honest about the nature of the world and the people in it. I'd learned that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to stop bad people from continuing to hurt others. I'd learned that revenge, when it's justified and carefully executed, can feel like justice. And I'd learned that being underestimated can be the most powerful weapon of all. My phone rang. A potential new client, someone who'd heard about my work through word of mouth. "Mr. Fallon? I have a situation that requires someone with your particular skills." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where someone needs to disappear, metaphorically speaking. The kind where someone who thinks they're untouchable needs to learn otherwise." I smiled, recognizing the tone. Someone else who'd been betrayed, someone else who wanted revenge but didn't know how to get it. Someone who needed the services of an invisible man who'd learned how to make other people disappear. "I think I can help you," I said. "When can we meet?" As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. I'd discovered a talent I hadn't known I possessed, a calling I'd never expected to find. The invisible man had become visible, and he was very good at his job,